like everything, your fonts, your storyboards, your images, your After Effects files, because I'm going to need to see all of it in order to open your file properly. And not that, but when you do that, you're going to have your work backed up. Like I just got a student from last year wrote me saying, hey, I lost my work and I've got permanent storage. So this way you'll always be able to retrieve your work if you store it in Google Drive. So tonight we're going to be going over squash and stretch and the bouncing ball. Remember, when you're working in Illustrator or Photoshop, use the HDTV template. And also make sure your files are RGB, not CMYK. In Photoshop, you would go like under image and change it there. And in Illustrator, it's file, document color mode, and then RGB. I am hitting enter to rename my layers. It'll make your life a lot easier if you name your layers when you're working. Our first assignment is we're going to be doing a animated logo. And I just laid this out real quick. We'll pretend this is the resting logo, okay? So again, remember, motion design is graphic design, but you're adding in time and space. So this is my resting logo. And we'll say it's 10 seconds. So I'm going to have everything stop moving and resolve itself around the 7-second mark. And the last 3 seconds will just be some small subtle motion. So I'm going to hit P for position. This is where everything's going to end up. With motion design, you can set your keyframes like I just did, and then move the playhead and make your change. Well, you can also, instead of going forward, you can work backwards. And this I strongly recommend when you're doing stuff like animated logos, because then everything comes in when you want it to. So this right here, I've already got my position set up, and you know what? I may as well do R for rotation too. And I'll do S for scaling just in case. So any keyframing I do, basically, this will be my perfect logo, and I can just work backwards and get to this point. So I'm going to start off with something new, and it's this path. We've already seen using the pen tool, and I've always already said when you've got the arrow tool selected and you're on any shape layer, you can get to the add feature. And that's when you do your twirl down, there's add right here. And I'm going to add trim paths. And you say, well, what are trim paths? There's a start and an end. The first path point I drew is the start. The last one I drew is the end. So if I want to draw on this point, this line, I'm going to animate the end for it. Anything with the stopwatch, you can animate. So I want my motion to start here at the beginning. I'm clicking the end. I already reduced it to 0. I'm going to have this move pretty quick. So if I'm at 24 frames per second, 12 frames would be half a second. So this is going to be pretty quick. It's going to go from 0 to 100, draw itself on. And while it's drawing itself on, I want it to draw itself off. So if I animate the start, it'll chase after it. You'll see what I mean by that in a second. Like that. And that's a little longer than I wanted it to be. So I'm going to shorten it up a little bit. Like such. So there's my little leading line coming in quickly, like such. If I want to speed it up, I can just move these two a little closer together, like that. So once that reaches where my square is going to be, we'll wait for that to, and if it's right here and I want it to scale out as a reveal, that means I should put my anchor point there. So I'm using my pan behind, and I'm hitting Command, holding that down to change the anchor point for that. And we're going to go to right where that connects right there. So I'm going to click right there, and I'll go forward a little bit, and I'll add a point there. I'll just have this go from 0 to 100. So line comes in, hits the spot. Wait a second. So and I don't want this to be seen once it hits it. So I've got to line this up a little bit better. I'm just moving my keyframes. That's a little too early. Okay, now I'm going to go back one frame. Page up and page down goes one frame at a time. Let me move this just a little bit more to cover that up. And I'm going to trim the path line with my Alt and the square bracket so it ends there. So I don't have to worry about it anymore. It draws on. Set that down a frame like that. And then I'll have my text push out of the box. So if I got that there, and I'll go forward to, that's doing that because I moved the anchor point. So I can fix that by getting rid of these frames here. Okay, now it's staying in place. Now I can have my logo come out. So I'll do a P for position, add a keyframe there, and I'll just move this keyframe down here because that's where I want it to resolve itself. I'll just have this appear from behind the square. I'll teach you something new about that in a second. So that's going to come in, that comes in, that slides across, and then lastly, I've got my star. So let's go to path. I'm going to add a point, go back to my arrow tool, move this to there. And I'm going to add a little bit of curve to the path point. I mean the motion path. I'll have that resolve a little sooner, like such. And then I can just have some glowing happening to the star or something like that. So this is an idea for my final logo. And I'm going to mask this out. So I want it to appear below the text so that no, it's actually going to need to be above. Okay. And it'll pass through. Actually, I should have it go. Slide back a little bit more. There we go. Now it's going to be completely behind it. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add where I want the logo to be seen. Line that up real quick. We're going to be covering this coming up, but this is a little preview for it. I want it to look like the text is appearing inside the square. So I'm using this shape as a matte. M-A-T-T-E, matte. The matte, when you're doing mattes and masks, they go over what you want to reveal. So this is on top of what I want to reveal. These are my modes. Clicking here, these are my switches. I want to be in my modes. So I just go to my track matte for the layer below it, and I choose alpha matte. You say, well, what's that going to do? Watch what happens to the text. And that's going to appear where I want it to. And as you can see, I need to have this start even further outside of there. And I can have the star fade in here. Right to about when it's about to start moving. I'll have a fade in. Then it rises out of there, moves, and I could throw an effect on it like a glow. Right there. And I'll just animate these over time. That. That. And let's see what that looks like real quick. So that's an example of animation hierarchy. I laid out my logo and I worked backwards. Stuff's coming in a specific order. And then there's a little bit of life once it's resolved itself. Okay? So think about what you want to do. Figure out how you're going to get there. Move your anchor point. Then move the playhead to where you want your stopwatches to start clicking on. Then move the playhead forward or backwards and start making changes. And that's the basics of motion design. And like I said, I just did something simple just to demonstrate real quick an idea of animation hierarchy. You know, and the other thing that we covered last week was selecting your keyframes by clicking the word, hover over, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. Then you can go into your speed graph and change how you're going to influence your velocity. I grab the influence handle, going closer to the keyframe, it's going to speed out. Going further away, it's going to slow into it. So this is going to go very quickly out and very slowly into the final keyframe. And then you just hit there to get out of your graph editor. See the difference in the speed of the text now? So any questions about that recap and an idea of information hierarchy and animation hierarchy, like what order things are coming in, how they're coming in, is there contrasting motion, like stuff coming up, stuff going down, and then a little bit of extra detail once the logo's resolved itself. That makes sense? Okay, good. I figured it'd be interesting to show you the idea of working backwards, like lay out your logo and then, you know, animate backwards so everything resolves itself, because logos are very precise. You want to make sure it lines up. All right, now, that quick little recap. We are now going to start on new stuff, the bouncing ball. Okay. So I'm going to delete everything. And as always, just make sure when you're in your composition settings, you're at 1920 by 1080. We'll work at 24 frames just to make it easier. And for this, we'll do 5 seconds. So it'll be like 5:00. All right, now, first thing new that we're going to cover tonight is motion blur. So what I want you to do first is make a square. And I'm going to put the anchor point at the middle of it. If I hold down Command or Control and I double click on the pan behind tool, it'll snap the anchor point there. So first just make a square, put it anywhere on your composition, and then put in some text. Doesn't matter what it says, and have it right below it. When you've got a square on the screen and some text, let me know. I'm just going to remind everyone, these are modes. Clicking here switches and modes. These are switches. For this part of the evening, you're going to want to be at your switches, these little check boxes. And what we're going to do for this first part is we're just going to have the stuff animate quickly across the screen from left to right, just straight across. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of them and hit the P key so I can start setting a keyframe for both of them at the same time. So you can set multiple keyframes at once by selecting multiple layers, set the playhead to where you want to click to start your animating, and then click on the right stopwatch. And I'm going to move to the 2-second mark and move these over to the other side of the screen and hit the spacebar to preview it. That's not very fast. So I'm going to slide my keyframes much closer. That's better. I'm going to move them even closer. Okay, that's pretty good. So mine are about half a second apart to get a nice fast motion. Let me know once you've got a nice quick motion across the screen. When you're working with motion blur, the faster you're moving, the more blur you'll get. So right now there's no motion blur. If I move my playhead, each frame is going to look crisp, which is a little unnatural. Okay, here's the workflow. First thing you're going to do is click here. This will enable motion blur for the composition we're in. Okay, so click here first and you'll see it light up blue. The next step is whatever layer or layers you want to add motion blur to. There's the blurry ball moving. So I'm going to click for both of these. So each, yes. Oh, wait. So I need to zoom out a little. Oh, okay. I'll zoom out a little. So I got it in big zoom for the recording. Can you see right here now? Okay, so I clicked here to enable motion blur. And then for each layer you want to add motion blur to, click the little checkbox for that layer where you have the ball with the motion blur to it. And now you'll see when I move my playhead, now I've got some blur happening. And like I said, the faster something moves, the more blur that's going to happen. So if I keep moving this closer and closer, you see the text gets blurrier and blurrier. Move this closer for the square. See? There's a lot of blur happening. Just to warn you, blurry text, if it's too blurry for too long, the audience won't be able to read it, okay? Like for this, it's fine if it stops moving. But if it's too much, you could always just click off of that so that there's no blur to the text. A way of faking blur is pixel motion blur. I'm going to put that on the text and let's see what happens. See how it's almost completely invisible for most of it because of the shutter angles. Let me try and change that shutter angle. This is a way of manually changing. Let me do automatic. And it disappears for a moment because it's just moving so fast. So sometimes pixel motion blur will help you, and other times you just click the motion blur setting. Any questions about turning on motion blur and turning it off for layers? You just first have to enable it for the sequence that you're working in, and then pick whatever layer you want and click motion blur for that layer. Everyone good for that? All right. So, time to start on the bouncing ball. Let me delete all this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a circle. So just hold down Shift And as I said last week, gravity is what sells this squash and stretch. So you're going to want to make sure that your anchor point is the bottom center, because that's what's going to be pulling it down towards the earth. And again, like I said, make sure you're using a circle, because you want perfectly rounded once I start showing you the math behind squash and stretch. So just make sure you start high enough so that it can like bounce, hit the ground, and like bounce 1 or 2 more times. When everyone's got their ball ready, just say, ready, or done. Say done. Nope, I just have it at 100, 100. I'm not going to be doing the scale for the first stopwatch. Scale's going to be last, but I just want to show you I'm doing a perfect circle so that my 100, 100 will be a perfect circle. I'm going to hit Control R or Command R, and that's going to pull up the rulers. And you could just drag a guideline down from the ruler. I'm going to make this my imaginary ground. Put a ground line down there, and then hit Command R or Control R to get rid of your rulers again. First, we're going to do the bouncing ball. What stopwatch are you going to use for changing to make it look like it's bouncing? Position. So you just hit P for position, and then move your playhead to the beginning of the timeline. So that's where we're going to start. And make sure before you click the stopwatch, your anchor point is on the bottom center of the ball. That's crucial. And then you can click the stopwatch. Now, let's strategize this. I'm going to have the ball drop, rise up, bounce again, and then bounce again. Okay? And then rise up a little bit. Things fall faster than they rise. Okay? Gravity's going to pull it down. So that means all your down keyframes from going down will be closer together, and the ball rising back up will be further apart than the down. So if it's 10 down, you might have 14 up. Does that make sense for frames? So let's try that. Let's move to the 10 frame, and I'm just going to hold down Shift, set this move straight down, and I'm using my selection arrow. So if I hit the space bar, that's actually pretty decent. Actually, I'm gonna make it 8 frames, make it a little bit faster. So everyone have that straight down. The ball will not rise up as high as it dropped. Okay? It's going to lose energy. So my bounce, I'll probably have it rise up to about this high. So if it was 8 down, it's going to rise up slower. So I'm going to try 10 up. So I'm going to go to 18. And then move it over to about here. Now, if this first drop was 8 frames, and it's going to drop a shorter distance, that means my second drop is going to be less than 8 frames. So I'll do 6 frames. Does that make sense to everybody? So if it was 6 frames down, it's going to need to be more than 6 frames up. So I'm going to try 9. And again, it's not going to rise as high as it fell the second time. So let me preview that with the space bar. I'm going to move my render area. I'm going to have all this slide over a little bit, just so it moves a little bit faster. So there's my down. I'm going to move the rest over a little bit because it's rising up a little too slow. This is just for my liking. And that last part's way too slow, so I'm going to slide that down. I'm going to slide this last half a little bit more. And then maybe speed that part up. Let's try it one more time. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. So everyone get your bouncing to a way that you like. And then when you've got it, let me know. I just slid around my keyframes until it looked a little better. Okay. So now I'm going to fine tune this. And remember, this is not graded. I'm just teaching the concept of motion blur, squash and stretch, and thinking out your first animation where you've got a deliberate idea that you're executing. So my next step is going to be easy easing. So if I just click on the word position, I've got all my keyframes selected. I can hover over any one of them, right click, choose keyframe assistant, easy ease. Again, I just hovered over one, right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. So now let me see if that changed the way my motion looks, which it should have. See, now it's a little bit more organic and natural, but I'm going to make it more deliberate. So once everyone has their easy eased keyframes, just say done. I'm going to click on the word position and then click. You good? Okay. I click the word position to have all my keyframes selected because you want to have your keyframes selected before you go into the speed graph. So I'm going to click on the graph editor right next to my timeline. And I'm going to move this up a little bit just so I can see my graph a little better. And remember, the button after the magnifying glass will fit my graph to view. So it's going to make it easier for me to see what's happening. And you can see it's slowing out of here. This is the fastest part of the motion right here. That's slowly going into the next keyframe. Let me know you've all got your speed graph up. Anyone need help, or is everyone good? Okay, so here's what we know. The yellow squares are our keyframes. This is up. This is going to be down. It's going to speed into the down keyframe. So that means I'm going to drag my influence handle and hold down shift after I start to drag. So I'm speeding into the second keyframe. Like that. See, already it looks like more of an impact because it's going faster as it gets closer to the ground. Like that. If I want, I could drag a little bit away from the first keyframe so it slows out of it a little bit. Like that. So that's my first impact. And that's looking pretty accurate. Everyone let me know when you've got your first impact looking good. So you do have it falling, and it's getting faster as it falls, correct? That's the whole important part. So this is my down. The next keyframe is my up. And it's going to get slower the higher up it's going. So I'm going to drag away from this so it's going slower on the way up. See, this is the fastest it's reaching, and then it's getting slower and slower as it gets to the top. So let me take a look at that. That's pretty good. Fast down, slow up. That's going to be my whole strategy for this. This is my next down, and I already know it's going to speed into the down. And on its way up, the final keyframe, it's going to go slower up. And that's my whole strategy for my speed graph. Speed into the down, slow into the rise up, then speed into the down again, and slow into the rise up. And already that looks far more polished. Any questions on thinking through your keyframe velocity in and out of one keyframe and into the next one? And if you want, you can always adjust the motion path. Like I said, you can move the path points, or you can adjust the curve handles. Like such, to fine-tune the motion. I'll give you another 2 minutes. And remember, if you're not seeing your speed graph, that means your keyframes aren't selected. So just click on the word position again, and you'll see your keyframes again. And also, if I want, I can move keyframes around inside the speed graph by selecting them and dragging them over to the side, just like I would in the timeline. And that won't change the graph that I made. It'll just move the keyframe closer together to speed up the motion. And I'm going to click the speed graph to get out of the speed graph. Was everyone able to easy ease their keyframes, go in the speed graph, and change the velocity of their motion? Who was that, Dino or... Okay. So which part did you have trouble with? Okay. Okay. And also, I want to remind everybody while we're here, if you go into Canvas and then for our class announcements, right here are all the pre-recorded lectures for the entire semester. So if you can't wait for me to put up the one we're doing now, you can always go to the old lecture because it's the same stuff. So just a reminder, that's under announcements. Okay, so I'm going to show one more time, but I'm going to use a square. All we're doing is I'm going to do P for position, move my playhead to the beginning. Well, click that, go a few frames. You know what? I forgot to put the anchor point at the bottom. There we go. All right, so now I can click that, go forward some frames. There's my hit. And there's the rise. You have that part so far, right, Dino? Okay, so the next step, once I've got all my motion, I click on my keyframes by hitting the word position, because remember, if you hit the stopwatch a second time, you lose all your keyframes. I hover over, right-click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. Do you have that part? Okay, now, with my keyframe still selected, I clicked on the speed graph. You have the speed graph up? Okay, so I click right here to magnify my speed graph. The yellow squares are my keyframes. I don't want to move them up or down. I want to drag the ball. Dragging away from the keyframe will slow out of it. Dragging towards the keyframe will speed into it. I know for the down, I want to speed into it, so it's going faster as it falls. Oops, I had all my keyframes still selected, so let's select on just that one and drag and then start holding down shift so it's going faster into the down. See that? The more it falls, the faster it's getting until it's at its fastest point just before it hits the ground. Does that part make sense? Okay, and then when it's going up, it'll be at its slowest as it reaches the top. So I'm going to drag this away. So it's going to hit, get a little faster, and then slow as it goes up. Like that. Does that part make sense? Okay, so you would just do that with multiple bounces. It would just rise less each time. So since it's rising less, it's going to fall a shorter distance. So your keyframes are just going to get closer and closer together as you work. I'm going to delete my square so I don't confuse anyone. And you can see how my keyframes start getting closer and closer as they're falling. Okay, so I got my motion the way I want. I've got my speed graph the way I want. I've turned on motion blur. That's lit up blue. And I want motion blur on this layer, so I click there. Hit the spacebar. Now I've got some motion blur. That's helping sell the motion as well. When everyone's got motion blur, just say done. Okay, good. All right, Dina, were you able to put on motion blur? All right, great. All right, so that part is all new tonight, and you've got that. The speed graph we covered last week. Now, you see how I was saying from the first class, I'm showing you the whole workflow because you'll be doing it 1,000 times this semester. Does the workflow make sense? Think about what you want to do. Well, we're going to have a bouncing ball, so that's going to be position. So I move the playhead, set up my position, and do my keyframes. Then it was a matter of easing the keyframes so that we can adjust them in the speed graph. And we know that it's going to drop faster, so I've got it going faster into the down and slower going up. All that makes sense to everybody? All right. So that's just thinking through your motion design. Now, easy ease is one of the 12 principles of animation. Slow in, slow out. So if I'm here and I do P for position, and then I move it to over here. Oh, wait. So first I'll do here. And then I'll just move it over there over time. So in my speed graph, the linear keyframes are just a straight line, so they're not speeding up or slowing down. But again, like I said, you hover over, right click, easy ease. Now it's slow into here and slow out of there. So it's slowing out and then slowing into the second one. Slow in, slow out. That's how you get that hill. That makes sense to everybody? All right. So now we're going to do squash and stretch. I'm going to put the square over here just so everyone can see squash and stretch. I'm going to hide the ball. So we're only focusing on the concept of squash and stretch. I'm going to put the anchor point at the center. And I'm going to hit P for position. I'm going to have it drop down once. And then rise up. And then drop down one more time. Okay, here's how squash and stretch works. Let me ease these first. I'm not going to go into the speed graph for this. I'm just going to hit S for scale. You want to turn off the chain because squash and stretch is non-uniform scaling, okay? Everyone got that so far? Everyone good? Were you able to turn off the chain for non-uniform scaling? Okay. So I'm going to show you stretch. When you stretch something, it goes up and in. So it's getting taller and thinner. All right. So stretch would look like this. I'm going to set my keyframe here so that it's still a perfect square. And just before the impact, Let me move this over a little bit. I'll set a keyframe. This is where I'm going to have my stretch. Now, this is important. You want to keep volume when you're doing squash and stretch. And this is why I like using numbers in After Effects. I'm going to zoom in here. Can everyone still see my numbers here? Okay, so magnified people can still see. All right, so if I say stretch, it's getting taller and thinner, and I want to keep my volume. What's that mean? I'll do 50 just so it's a nice even number. So stretch, it's going from 100 to 150. So if I went up 50, that means I'm going in 50. So I went in 50 and up 50. And that's what it looks like. It's the same volume. I just stretched it. It's stretching. Does everybody see that? Got it? Okay. Now, stretch is up and in, okay? Squash is the opposite. Stretch is just before impact. That's what stretches it out because the gravity's pulling. Squash is at the impact. So stretch is up and in. Squash is down and out. So my perfect square was 100 by 100, okay? Squash, this hitting the ground, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add 50. So I'm going to add 50. So it's going out, and that's got to go down 50. So my squash would be 150, 50, and my stretch would be 50, 150. See how I'm keeping the volume? Squash is down and out. Stretch is up and in. Does that make sense to everybody? So you want to keep your volume consistent. And as this is rising a little bit, I'm going to add a keyframe before it rises. And I'll say right here, I'll stretch it again. Now remember, it's losing energy. So if I did 50 the first time, I'll do 40 the second time. So I'm going to go back to my my square, and I want to stretch. So instead of 150, I'm going to go 140, and I'm going to take 40 out of here, which would be 60. So I added 40 and I took away 40. Does that make sense? Because here I added 50, I took away 50. I did the same thing. I added 50, I took away 50. It's losing energy. So instead of doing 50, I'm doing 40. I added 40 and I took away 40. Everyone get that? Okay. Now, right before we're near the midpoint, it'll be a perfect square again. So I'm going to go 100, 100. So that's what squash and stretch looks like. So it's starting to fall again. So that means it's going to get ready to stretch again. So I'm going to add a keyframe. And just before the impact, the frame before will be my stretch. Now, if my last stretch was 40 and it's getting weaker, this time I'll do 30. So I'm going to add 30. and then I'm going to subtract 30. And then my squash, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go 30 and then take away 30. So I'm going down and out. And I'll keep it like that for a frame. And then have it go back to a square again at the end. I'm going to ease my keyframes, and then we'll preview that. Here's my render bar, and I hit the space bar to preview it. Can everyone see the squash and stretch happening? Squash is up and in. I mean stretch. Stretch is up and in. Squash is down and out. You want to keep the volume. If I'm going up 30, I go in 30. And with each bounce, it's going to get less energy. So that means my numbers will get smaller and smaller. That's why being able to work numerically saves you a lot of time as an animator. Does everybody see that? So I'm going to hide that square. Well, actually, I'll just get rid of it. So now I just do the exact same thing with my ball. That's why I did a ball. It's a circle, which means 100, 100 is that circle. So right about here, I hit S for scale, turn off my chain. I'm going to start my stretch. Now, here's a little tip. S is scale, R is rotate, T is transparency, P is position. I hit S to get my scale stopwatch. I could at this point hit the U to see all my keyframes. Or if I only want to see a certain amount, if I want to see scale and position, so I already have scale. To see position plus scale, I just hold down Shift and then hit P. That's how you can add or subtract. I'll hold down Shift and hit P. You can add or subtract an extra stopwatch. So if I just hit P, I would not see my scale anymore. If I need to see my scale again, Shift S, or I can hit the U key. So I just did a Shift P to see the position and the scale. The reason I did that is I know that this I can see more easily. This is where the impact's going to be. That's the frame before impact. So this is where my stretch is going to happen. And I'm going to do, the more stretch you do, the more liquidy something's going to look. The less stretch you do, the more rigid it's going to look, like a coconut or a bowling ball. I'll do 60 for the first one. So I'm going to stretch 160, and then I've got to go in 60. So I added 60, and then I subtracted 60. There's my squash. I'm just going to switch these numbers around. I'm going out 60, and I'm going down 60. Right about here is where it's going to be a square. So right there is where my stretch is going to be. Now, if my first stretch was 60, it's going to lose a little energy. So I'll do 50 this time. Stretch is in and up. And then right there, I'm going to go back to a perfect circle, which is 100, 100. So here's my first squash and stretch. It's stretching on its way down, squashing as it hits, stretches a little as it rises, and then you're at a perfect circle again before you get to the top. I'm going to start my squash and stretch here, add a keyframe. Right before the impact is when it has the most stretch, so that's where it's going to be. So if I did 50, I'm going to do 40 this time. So I'm going to go up 40. I'm going to take away 40. Then my stretch will be the opposite of these numbers. I'm going to go in 40, and I'm going to go down 40. And right here's where my stretch will take place. And I'll do 30 this time. So I'm going to go in 30 and up 30. And right here, I'll set it back to a circle again. Let's preview that. I'm going to easy ease it as well. See, now that's got a lot more life. We added some motion blur. We changed the velocity in and out of the keyframes. And then we added squash and stretch. So now it's got a little bit of life and some weight to it. Does everyone understand the concept of squash and stretch? And you see how working numerically just makes it so much faster and easier. Just looking at my notes here real quick. All right, yeah, so I recapped that whole thing of squash and stretch. So everyone has that concept? Okay, great. I am going to show you real quick, since we got a little bit of time before I dive into lab. Well, actually, no. Do you want me to dive into lab and help out with any of your projects? Because, Sarah, did you put those files in the drive for me? Oh, great. All right, so that's fine. I just couldn't. I'll show you what it looks like on my end. And you'll see why, you know, now I've got the artwork. I'm not going to reconnect the artwork, just so you can see. All right, I'm going to just close this. I don't need to save it. Or does anyone want to see my file? Like, I could email it out. 1 second. I'll email this out to the class set. You all have it. And you can look at my keyframing and my speed graph. All right, so now I can close this. And I'm going to open up Sarah's. And this class, I'm just showing you what it looks like when I only get the file and not the artwork. Because I didn't send out the folders until I was like, oh, I forgot to make the folders. See, it's going to say I'm missing files. Now, I've got your shapes and your layers, and I've got your keyframes. But when the artwork's missing, you're going to get this. So the fast way of relinking is you select your image over here in your project panel. This is where you store everything. Right-click, replace footage, file, and then you find where it is on your computer. Now, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to do something different. I'm going to relink doing it this way. So here's her project, and here's her artwork. Now that they're together again, and I've got her whole work assembled properly, when I open up her file, it'll automatically be linked. Oh, great. Oh, I like that. That's very subtle. Oh, and I like that smoke. Very nice. Very, very nice. And this was what I was just going to show with the extra time. Where's your rotation? Okay, so I like this. I like the artwork. Okay. Now we all saw that little rotate and position, scale, anchor point, position. I saw rotation. Oh, you know what? That's because, there we go. That's the layer for it. Where's it here? Yeah, it's there. There's your rotation keyframes. Okay, that's perfect. So I really like this a lot. This is a great start. And most importantly, the detail. You've got a shadow. The shadow's changing with the relation of how close it is to the ground. Slick, like that. Like the little, yeah. And you got the cloud going, you know, great. I'm loving what I see. This is extremely impressive for just having 1 week under your belt. So I am going to, I'm liking everything there. It's a fantastic start. So I'm going to do a square. This was one of the things I was going to show since we had a little bit of extra time. Okay. Rotation. So you now know slow in, slow out, which is easy ease. That's one of the 12 principles of animation. And tonight we covered squash and stretch, which we just did. Another of the 12 principles of animation is overshoot. And here's what overshoot looks like. I'm going to work backwards here. No, wait, let me zoom out. Okay, let's say this is where it's going to end, right here. And it's coming in from the side of the screen. Right there. That would be the position keyframe, okay? Overshoot is going past something and then back a little bit. So what that means is if right here, 714 is where it's supposed to resolve, if I go a few frames past it, just a little bit, and then I go back a few frames, and I was at 714, so I'm going to go less than 714 a little bit. I go forward a little bit, and I'm going to do 715, then go below it, and then end up on 714. And I'll ease that. So it's going a little bit past, then back, past, then back, and then resolving where you want it. That would be overshoot. Like that. Does everybody understand overshoot? So that would be overshoot for the position. And then you've got the rotation. Actually, this is neat because I can show you one more of the 12 principles of animation. And this is good because the sooner you know them, then you could start incorporating it to your motion design. So that's overshoot. Another principle of animation is called anticipation. Now, your next motion was it's going to rotate. It's going to rotate in this direction. Everybody see that? It's going that way. Got it? So I'm going to hold down Shift and hit R so I can keep my keyframes. Now what anticipation is the opposite motion before the main motion. Well, what's that mean? Superman. When Superman goes to fly, he doesn't just fly off the ground. He crouches down first, then he leaps up. It's the opposite motion. When a pitcher's throwing a baseball, he doesn't just throw it forward. He winds up backwards and then throws it forward. Same with the boxer throwing a punch. He winds backwards, then punches forward. Does everybody get that idea? So if we wanted to add a little anticipation, I go forward a little bit. If it's going to rotate this way, the anticipation means it's going to rotate in the opposite direction first. This is a way of getting the viewer's eye to the main action that's about to happen. They do it all the time in cartoons. So now we've got the rotation happening. Okay. So we did overshoot position, which we just learned. Then anticipation, it's going the opposite direction before the main motion. Well, now we know anticipation, and we just learned overshoot. So that means I could add a little overshoot to this. So I'm at 37. I'll go a little bit past 37. Then I'll go a little bit before 37. A little bit past it again, but not too much. And a little bit before it again. And I could end up on 37. And I'll easy ease that as well. Now let's see what that looks like with overshoot and anticipation. Now this last one I don't need. Like that. There we go. So it just gives a little bit more life to it. And know what else we could do? We could enable motion blur. Now that we know that. See? You don't have to have as much overshoot. And you can time it differently to make it a little bit more subtle. Just little things that give extra life to something. Everyone familiar with the concepts of overshoot and anticipation now? Okay. And someone mentioned this last week, and I'm glad they did, because I like how you're thinking for yourselves. You're quick learners this class. You can do overshoot and anticipation for position, scale, and rotation. Remember, with opacity, you cannot go above 100 or below 0. So you can do a little bit of overshoot with opacity, but you can't go all the way up to 100 with it. You know what I mean? Like if I had some text and I wanted to give a little bit of overshoot for the fade in, just say, you go forward, and just as long as I don't go to 100, let's say I do 90. I could go a little bit below it, so I'll do 80. I'll do 80. Then I'll go past 90, so I'll go 94. Then I'll go below it. I'll do 84. Then I'll do 92. See, numbers really help with overshoot. Then I'll do 88. So I'm going 2 above, 2 below. I could do 91, 90, that'd be 89, and then end on 90 again. See how you get that little bit of a flicker? That's what overshooting the opacity would look like, but I'm just showing you how you could technically do something like that, but like such. Any questions? I am really, really liking you got some great choices. You got some good choices with the layout. I like the color palette. I like the art style. There's just so much thought into this. This is really impressive. And you see the preview resolution is at half. If you want to fine tune it, you'd go to full. But if your computer's running slow, you could do third or quarter, whatever, to you're not changing the overall resolution of your animation. You're just changing the resolution of the playback. It's like lowering the quality in YouTube so that you don't eat up your data when you're listening to it like a song on your phone with mobile data. Make sense? Okay. Now, I'm going to go over this because this will also talk about layout in Illustrator and Photoshop. I was saying if you're going to bring something in, when you do your template, it automatically puts a title safe grid on it. And in After Effects, the title safe grid is right here. You click once and go to title safe. Now here is what that means. Is everybody ready? Let me know when you're able to find title safe. Okay, here's how it goes. The outermost box is your action safe. What's that mean? It means you want the majority of your important motion inside of this box, okay? Like we've all seen like an over the shoulder where someone's talking and the head would be like a little bit off camera, but there's still some on camera. That's fine. You know, stuff can always go off the frame just as long as you're being deliberate about it. The important stuff should all be happening within here. Does that make sense? This would be your main action area. It's okay to go past it, but as long as the majority of it is in here, you're good. That makes sense? Okay, so that's the first line, the main action area. The second line right here, this is your title safe area. What's that mean? Has anyone ever watched YouTube on their TV? Okay, yeah, I do it all the time. There will be people who will be like, oh, I'll put the text here because I can see it on my computer screen. When you watch that on your home computer, the audience is not seeing that. They're seeing this. Got it? Because this is the title safe part. If it's really important text, like titles and logos and all that, it has to be inside this title safe area. Okay? Even a little bit away from it, just be on the safe side, and then you'll be able to see it on a phone, on a TV screen, whatever. That's why this is called title safe. Everyone got that? Okay, good. And then lastly, you just got these little action lines that help you center stuff on your screen. Like, and this is obviously your center point. So that's title safe. That's how you turn it off and on. The majority of your motion is inside the title. I mean, the safe action margin. You had a nice natural reaction, like an eye for that. And it looks great composition wise, you know. So I can't wait to see more of this. This is going to be very colorful and fun. So great job so far. You know, then you can think about if you want to add some overshoot or some anticipation. You could always add or subtract keyframes as you're working along. So very nice. Anyone else have anything they want to show me or something that inspired them? Because if not, we could just, you know, end lab a little early. But just make sure you're collecting artwork, you're doing artwork, you're, you know, just keep moving forward with your motion design. This is the perfect thing. A little bit of motion each week is is the way to go, rather than put it off to the last week, because you're going to have your senior shows to get ready. You're going to be working on your portfolios. You're going to be, you know, lining up for your next college or a job. So you're just going to have too much stuff the last few weeks of school, and you don't want to put your homework off to the last second. That's like the worst thing you can do, because motion design is time consuming. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I imagine this took you at least an hour, right, Sarah? Yeah, figure it out. Because like I said, you're new to motion design. You're new to After Effects, so you're learning new software plus a new skill set, and then figuring out how to incorporate your pre-existing graphic design skill set into that on top of it. So it's creating the artwork, making sure your layers are set up so that you can work however you want in your motion. It's going to take you some time, but, you know, you can get there. And this is looking excellent. I really like this a lot. Let me see something. There's your, okay, so this is all one layer, like such. Just checking, because it's a PNG. Okay, cool. Very nice. I really like that a lot. Great art, good design, nice detail. Excellent. Very glad I got the artwork to look at it. All right, does anyone have anything that they want me to look at? Or something that interested you that you wanted, some help breaking it down? We've got a second, so I'm going to show you something a little extra just to maximize your time here with me. All right, now you've already seen shapes, and you already know that if you draw something with the pen tool, you go down to the path stopwatch, you can then go forward and animate. I held down Shift and clicked once. You can animate the path points as well as the Bezier curve handles. You just got to keep moving the playhead. Okay, so we did that. That's a shape layer. You can get that by doing the shape tools or the pen tool. You could also get stuff by going layer new, which we talked about. And I'm going to do a solid layer. You go, well, what's the difference between a shape and a solid? First, you can give it a size, or you can click make comp size, and then you can give it a color. I'll give it red. You go, okay, fine. Well, what's different between this and a red shape layer? The shape layer has path points. You can apply effects to it from the add. Solid layers are good for just putting a solid color down or for using it as a layer to put an effect on, such as glue gun, I guess. Like that, so I put an effect in it. So you can put effects inside solid layers. Okay, so if you want to change the color on a solid layer, just go Layer, Solid Settings. That's where you can change the color. And I'm going to put a fill color on here, and I'll show you why in a second. And I'll just make it red, sure. So I've got that, and has anyone watched Comedy Central? Okay. We'll pretend this is their logo here. They do this a lot with their bumpers. Bumpers are the tiny graphics in between shows. They're like 4 to 7 seconds long. All right, so I'm going to put a fill on the type as well. Okay, and this time I'm going to make the color white. Okay, so you've learned about linear keyframes. Linear keyframes are the default, and you've seen easy eased keyframes. So I'm going to go, E for effect. There we go. E for effect, which is fill. I'm going to click on color, and I'm going to click on color here. Now I'm going to hit U on my keyboard, so I only have my keyframes. So these are linear keyframes by default. And let's say I want to do that quick flash where the color changes of the background and the type, which is a very modern thing to do. I don't want linear keyframes, and I'll show you what's going to happen. I'm going to go forward 1 second. If I change the red to blue, it becomes a gradient over time. That's what a linear keyframe does. It's a gradual change over time. Everyone see that gradation? Okay, so I'm going to hit undo. A new keyframe I'm going to show you. You select the keyframes that you want to put this on. Right click, toggle, hold, keyframe. The majority of your keyframes will be under keyframe assistant, but toggle hold is outside of it. So I'm going to hit toggle hold. And I'm going to go forward 1 second. And now I'm going to go from red to blue. It's an absolute instant change without any gradation. And I'll change the color from white to, say, red. And here's what it's going to look like. Like that. They do it all the time in movies, like title sequences. They do it on commercials. Does everybody see this on TV a lot? That's how it's done. It's just a hold keyframe. It's an instant change over time. Okay? So if you're doing something like that for your logos, that's the quick and easy way of doing it. Otherwise, you'd have to have one frame between these so it changes over the course of one frame. Like, you know, it's red one frame, the next frame it's blue. But hold frames are just a faster, easier way of doing it. And you don't have to worry about your keyframes sliding around and messing stuff up. Okay, great. So if no one has anything else for tonight, we can call it a day. And this is very important. Next week, we'll be back on campus for those students who can be back on campus. Okay, so we'll be in room, what is it, like 3296 or something like that? We can go to the syllabus. Okay, excellent. It's also on the PDF. So yeah, 3296. I put in the wrong CRN number. I put the course room number. So it's 3296. So we'll be on campus. And for those who can't be there, I will run a Zoom and I will record it with OBS. So not only will you be able to share your work via Google Drive, just make sure you have all your artwork and stuff. If you can't make it, I'll pull it up and I'll share my screen through the stream, plus record it so everyone has their feedback and ways of fixing their designs, you know, during lab time recorded. Make sense? Okay, excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing everyone who can make it next week in class, and those who can't, I'll just send up a Zoom right before the class starts. All right, excellent. Well, have a great weekend, everybody, and congratulations on finishing up the first week and a half of motion design. I hope everybody's learning stuff and finds it a little bit interesting at least. No problem at all. And if everyone has, you know, keeps absorbing stuff readily, I can keep teaching ahead. But I just don't want to overwhelm people, and I want everyone to be able to at least soak in the fundamentals. Make sense? Yes. Yeah. Yes, that counts. Oh, also, I'm glad you said that. This is important. Everybody lives in different spots. Got it? It's winter time. If it's going to be bad weather in your area and not at the main campus, email me and come in on Zoom, okay? I'm going to send the Zoom out to everybody. Like I said, it's winter. I don't want someone getting in a car crash trying to get to or from class, all right? Yeah, no problem. We can maximize virtual and in-person learning. Like I said, if you're in an area that's not going to get snow and you can get back and forth safely, come on into class. But if you can't, you know, the Zoom will always be there. And I will let people know, like, if my area is going to be a nightmare, I'm pretty close to the college. I'll say, look, you know, we're doing virtual tonight because it's going to be a mess. All right. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll see those who can make it into class Tuesday night on campus. All right. Have a great night, everybody.